I've actually quite enjoyed having a job that is completely different to mountaineering, a job which tests my brain, I think, but is not physical. And my mountaineering has stayed very much my hobby. And so I only actually go mountaineering once a year. And I spend a lot of time thinking about where to go and researching to make sure that one time a year when I cross the Bergschrund, that I'm doing something that I really, really want to do. We have to be careful with mountaineering that we preserve the mountains for future generations in the same state as they are now. We preserve challenges that we can't do for one reason or another for future generations who will, history shows, always be better. And I think if we introduce too much maybe competition into mountaineering through sponsored mountaineers who are always striving to achieve something extra, then we have to be very careful with the ethical standards, I think. But when I go mountaineering, I go now, because I've been doing it for 30 years to the greater ranges. And so I go partly for the ethnic interest and the pleasure of going somewhere new and interesting that I've not been to before. And secondly, almost, I go for the mountain itself. So what I will tend to do is every time I see a photograph of something that's slightly interesting, like we just saw downstairs, something slightly interesting, I register it in here, I find out what it is, and I will keep a note. And then every year I will go through all of the objectives that I've accumulated and choose one which hopefully satisfies the right criteria. And for me, that will always be away from the crowds. So it will always be somewhere where I haven't been, ideally, and in a perfect world where no other mountaineers have been. And remarkably, there are still plenty of places in the world that satisfy those criteria. There's a Japanese explorer whose name you're probably familiar with, Tom Nakamura. And I saw a photograph that he had taken of Sugunye, but it was not of the north face of Sugunye. And I looked into it, made a note, put it in my file, and it was an area which I'd never been to before. I'd never been to China before, so that was immediately attractive. I looked into it and found that it was increasingly possible to go mountaineering in China. It had been very, very difficult up until that time. And the photograph showed, well, I knew that Sugunye had only been climbed, I think it was 3 times before, but always from the south. And the photograph, it just showed the top of the north face. You could just see the top of the north face on the corner of the photograph. And Paul Ramsden and I thought, well, it just looks a very, very interesting and good mountain. And the other thing that was attractive to us was that I think it's about 500 meters higher than any other mountain in the immediate area. And it was obviously, like the objective in terms of a mountain to climb in that part of the world. And so we went, thinking that we would have a good time climbing or attempting to climb the mountain. And the fact that it had that excellent ice line that was so obvious on it was something that we weren't aware of until just a few weeks before we left, when there was an American climber, Jack Tackle, contacted me, and he showed me a photograph of this white line. And we didn't know whether it was ice or powder snow, but we knew there was a very, very obvious line there. But we only found that out just a few weeks before we were due to leave.